Welcome back, everyone, to Roompact's ResEdChat podcast. If you're new to the show, every episode, our team of hosts brings you timely discussions on a variety of topics of interest to hired professionals who work in and with university housing, residence life, residential education, etc. So this is another in our annual series highlighting our wonderful team of bloggers that are joining Roompact for the year to bring a diversity of content to our blog. And it's just great to kind of have some get to know you episodes here on the podcast and help to kind of give a little bit more of a deeper, warmer sort of dive into the topics that they are exploring in their blog posts. So, Ashley, if you want to kick us off and briefly introduce yourself and your professional background, which is what I feel like we'll be kind of farming from for this episode and the topic of like moving into mid-level positions and everything. But then, yeah, just introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm Ashley Unmacht, she, her pronouns. I'm currently an assistant director of residence life at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I've done that for the last 2 years, but just like most people, I started off as an RA. I went to the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater and got really involved, decided I wanted to do higher ed. I went to the University of Kansas, studied higher ed, women, gender, and sexuality studies, which was cool. And was like an assistant hall director there. And then it kind of kicked off my professional career post-grad at the University of Arizona, where I was for a while before coming to my current role as an assistant director. So right now, my position is very I would say like classic mid-level. So I supervise full-time hall directors. I have like a collateral area. I do our breaks and transitions for residence life here. And yeah, a good amount of my experience has been at larger schools, which I've come to enjoy. It's like definitely its own beast, but yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, and I think like your experience sort of moving up, will be what we explore today a little bit, because I think it's just always nice to have episodes where I feel like we kind of zoom in on career transitions, how people have kind of navigated things, figured out the right type of position at the right type of institution. Like for you, just knowing like I like the big public institutions, and it's like they come with a lot of unique aspects to it. I can certainly compare it to other institution types. So it's like we can start to better know those things, and when you feel like you're ready for something new, whether it's moving up or over, what have you, we've had many episodes over the past couple of years on different aspects of career transitions and stuff. So I appreciate you joining to explore a little bit of that from your own story and everything. But before we get to all that, at this juncture in your career journey, you are part of the Roompact blogging team. What inspired you to want to join the team?
It's been a few months and I've really enjoyed it so far. I feel like I work at a Roompact school right now. And I was reading blog posts, and my whole life I've liked to write. I read a lot too. And I also really enjoy any sort of like expression and creativity at work. I love an activity. I love a presentation. I love a talk or something like that. So to me, like this is another way to like express and be creative. It's definitely like a different kind of medium. It's much more controlled than just like getting up in front of people and giving a talk or something like that. So it's something I wanted to challenge myself in, I think. And I've been focusing on so far a lot of like supervision based topics. So about being like the myths of being a chill supervisor and like boundaries related especially to student staff. And I think that working with Roompact and being a blogger has been a good way, I feel like, to like put my ideas together in a way that like hopefully people enjoy reading. It's a lot of like my opinions and experiences, which aren't like always the best in a presentation. So I think this is like a fun way to like get those out there and share about my experiences and share my expertise, and like doing it in a fun kind of creative way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the way that I kind of came up in blogging and did some other more formal things in the years after that. But I think having a platform and an avenue to sort of like, this is what I'm thinking about. I'm trying to connect the dots and pull together instead of a coherent, sort of package and stuff, like helps to process, and then helps to sort of put yourself out there, distinguish yourself, sort of, how you're sort of approaching things, the way that you think about kind of your strategy around supervision, all that. So, yeah, I mean, it's good stuff. And I think, so much, especially with kind of our topic for this episode today around like, navigating career transitions and this being sort of like, okay, you're moving into like a mid-level position and, uh, preparing for that, kind of, uh, the changes to expect and all that. Like, I think it's just always really powerful, uh, to have folks speaking from their own experience, because I think certainly there's got to be kind of broad strokes things that are maybe more universally true, but there's also going to be a lot of things that are very unique, and having as many people kind of speak to their uh, the anecdotes of their journeys and stuff, I think is really powerful and helpful. So we'll, I think, spend some time with this question a little bit. So I'll just start with a very broad question, but like, what are some reflections on your journey into a mid-level position?
So I'll start with like I've been on the fast track. I feel like since I've been in college, I graduated in 3 years, and was just trying to save money and like be really efficient. And so I was an assistant hall director when I was 21, and was like starting full time. And my RAs that I supervised were like the same age as me or older, sometimes even. So that was, I feel like, definitely going to be the seed of how my career has progressed so far. And it's interesting to like look back because I only spent a few years being a hall director post grad, and decided that like it was time for me to move up. And I think there were a few reasons why. There weren't people that I saw that were my age moving up. I'm definitely like the first of my like friends and peers and things like that. But I knew, I started to think like my supervisor. I was anticipating a lot of needs, and I was like, okay, I feel like I've got this. And I like knew a lot of times the avenues that like I'd have to go if I like presented my supervisor with a question or something like that. And I started to feel like I was like maxing out on what I could give and what I was getting to out of my experience. Well, the difficult stuff was a lot less difficult. And honestly, the challenges of living on started to build up too. This is all happening, and it's like, of course, like this is when fire alarms really were happening every night, and it was like bleeding into my personal life a little bit too. And I was like, you know what? I think like I'm gonna start looking. So I feel like, I mean, that was only 2 years ago, but I've definitely learned a lot since. I think something like my biggest thing I've learned about is and thought about is what it means to be a peer. I feel like this is not something I had to think about as a hall director, but I feel like now I definitely have a distinction in my mind between like generational peers and my positional peers. So, for example, my like generational peers are like the people who are my age, like the people that I've met before this, like the friends that I've grown up with and things like that. And like who were born around the same year as I was, but my positional peers for the most part are not. And I feel like I've had to think a lot about that. And with that, like, my friends who are working residence life and not right now, don't always like relate to the things I'm sharing about work. And I've had to like kind of navigate that because I hadn't before. Like they're here to offer a listening ear, but can't relate, can't offer advice. And then like on the other hand, the people that I need to go to for those things, like my positional peers at work and like across the country even, are like not in the same life phase as me, which is totally fine. But I've had to learn like how to have conversations about, people's kids and the things that their careers that have lasted a long time, and that they have a lot of knowledge on. And I think that is something that I wasn't expecting out of my experience.
Yeah, I appreciate you kind of going through the whole journey there, because I think a couple of things that sort of resonate with me. Like one, I guess, just the acknowledgement. Like there are pros and cons of being sort of like the youngest, or the first or whatever, like, and kind of going that path. But I think with all of that, I think I'll sort of like, to your credit, I think it's that idea that you were recognizing. Uh, like an intuitiveness of sort of like what you were doing, and maybe seeking out like a new challenge and all that, because I think like and I'll not really put like kind of a qualifier on this, but I think people can get to a certain position, and if it's sort of just like not a challenge. They're kind of like maybe the negative part of it is that if they sort of like check out or whatever and they think it's like early retirement, whatever. But like I think just always trying to kind of calibrate the sort of like the challenge of a position with what you can sort of learn and gain from it. But then if it's like starts to kind of crest down and it's sort of like, oh, I feel like I'm kind of sleepwalking. It's not really like engaging me that much. It's not as novel or new anymore and all that, because I think the part of it, I think just knowing certainly with res life and the folks who kind of commit to this work, like there is, I think, an expected sort of like churn and movement, whatever. Cause it's like, yeah, you're not supposed to be like, a residence hall director for like 15 years or something. Like, I mean, one, it's just like, it's a tough job, but also like there's a value in sort of like still being very like, close to the students, since you literally are very, often student facing and stuff like, so it's just like an idea of like, well, you should be at this point ready for whatever is next, whether it is moving up into a middle position in residence life or some other functional area or whatever else. So I think just, I guess, to your credit, recognizing that you could uh, challenge yourself and grow and be of service, still in some way, even where it's like, you've done the job of being an RA, being, working in the halls and everything, and then, supporting those folks that are doing that work, but not kind of, uh, overstaying your welcome maybe wherever it wasn't like certainly wasn't giving you as much as it could have or should have, and then it's like, okay, well, if I'm like moving on, somebody else can take on that opportunity and get a lot from that, get a lot more than I was. So I think just because I think some of this could be like happenstance or sort of like right place, right time. But I don't, like, what was sort of your mindset, I guess, was sort of going at this with like an intentionality, a plan, sort of a roadmap, or like how is that sort of in the mix here? Because I guess it's that idea of like you have to be doing that sort of like self awareness, internal work, but then you do need to be like, well, how am I going to get to whatever is next? Like, did you know, like, oh, I absolutely want to be, doing the type of position you are now, or just was sort of, I don't know, I'm sort of like processing out loud here, but I guess it's just if you can speak to sort of the way that you were intentionally creating the roadmap that you were trying to follow in this sort of journey.
Definitely. I think, well, my first blog post was called like Res Life for Life, and how essentially like that's not my mindset. I don't know my end game. I feel like there was a time like as a student I was really passionate and excited. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna make all these changes at the university, and then like working 40 hours a week is like, like what do I want to be doing with my time? I feel like started to think about that a little bit more. So I feel like I knew then and I know now that I don't know my end game right now. That like I don't have it all like planned and figured out, but I can figure out like what feels good next and what's serving me. I did think though a lot about my readiness and like was talking to people in mid-level positions and things like that. And I think something that I still think about is like what do I have to offer? Like not only what have I done to prepare, but like what makes me a valuable member of a leadership team, that like adds something different, but also is a valid and like real member of the team that can like uh, be there to represent the group. So I feel like that included like my supervision, communication, thinking about my passions and my talents, and yeah, just like how am I different but still able to represent a team. And I think for me, it also looked like thinking, like, I think a lot of people focus on their resume, and that's important, like years of experience and experiences you're bringing. But I think my mindset was also beyond my resume. Like, am I ready to deliver lots of decisions that I might disagree with as my own? And like, am I softening the truth to be liked? Like, how important is it to me to be liked? Am I ready to, become the department, so to speak, and like be the face of like what's happening? I think those are like some bread and butter pieces of being a mid-level manager. And yeah, I'm really glad that I considered those things, and it's something I still think about now. Like, how am I adding value to this space, and like what makes me a good fit for this?
Yeah, I think that's probably like, and it kind of sets up my next question. So I'll kind of, do a little bit of a weave here of, that idea of certainly, checking in with yourself and doing that self-examination to kind of figure out like, again, you don't need to have this sort of like broader like 10-year plan or whatever, but just knowing like, I think that I can grow more, like I'm sort of reaching the bounds of this. I need something new and I feel ready for that and whatever else, sort of like making sure all that sort of is aligned. And then, yeah, I mean, like try to seek out the sort of like coming across to me of, asking those questions of like, what are the blind spots that I'm not thinking of? That idea of like, well, you're gonna have to be the face of the department. You might have to kind of like do this or that. And it's like, and then usually be like, okay, I don't want to do any of that. So like that's sort of how it morphs into sort of the intentionality thing of like, okay, I'm gonna contour this a little bit. I'm gonna do a little tinkering as to, like I do feel like I'm ready, but maybe not for that, not for that. Like, and that's just been my whole thing is I think it does take you doing a little bit of sort of like getting meta about yourself, your career, and all that at certain kind of crossroad moments because I think you need to figure out like, yeah, like the whole thing of like working in a big public institution. It's like, okay, like how large do you want your team? Do you want to be more, kind of individual contributor or managing people or yeah, like do you want to be the director, the decision maker? You're the one driving and creating the strategy or whatever. Like those sort of things, and that can at least help you figure out like what the next thing is. And then like being in those positions where it feels like, wow, this is like, challenging in a good way, like you're going to be learning and growing, and that serves you to get to the next thing. And like it is just sort of like those kind of, if you can have the kind of the privilege, the opportunity to kind of do that checking in. But then so I think, yeah, the segue to the next question is like you were doing a lot of sort of information gathering, anticipating your next step and everything. Was there anything that you wish you knew more or wish you knew at all before moving on? Like, was there something that you overlooked, or was there something that you did sort of do some exploration on, but that you wish you knew more about before moving up into your current position?
Well, on a very like concrete, like tangible level, um, I wish I knew just how good living off would be for me. I feel like during the time I was living on, I did it, like try to enjoy it and knew that it, like I knew it wasn't going to last forever. But I think towards the end, I was like really ready to get off, and I was in a space where I was like, well, am I going to regret this? Like not having to pay rent is so nice, but I think like now I wish I would have known like how easy that was going to be for me. This I sleep better. It just works better for me personally. I think like yeah, there were some growing pains with like having to commute and actually like pack my lunch and not just like go home. But it's nice not being stopped in the parking lot when I'm bringing groceries and like being asked about work and like those types of things. So I think that's something I wish I knew. I don't know. That felt like a big barrier in my head. But I figured it out. And I think on a more broad level, though, I would say I wish I knew just that it was going to take time. I think, I mean, if you're anything like me, when you start, like want to hit the ground running, you have these ideas and you're so excited. But like when you start at a place, it's just a lot of sharing and a lot of listening, and a lot of like trying to figure out where you kind of fit. And like, it's going to take time. You're going to have to talk about it with people. You're going to have to talk about your supervision style and like talk about your approach. But you also have to be about it. And that takes time to prove. Like you have to show that, it was going to take time for me to show that I was going to follow through and meet deadlines and like, that I liked difficult conversations and that I'm here to support my team and things like that. I think that time matters, and that like it just takes moments of people noticing like how you handle tension and how you celebrate them and just how you show up in meetings and where you sit and who you talk with. That kind of becomes who you are and what people know you for. You can't like you can't just come in and be great. It doesn't work like that. So I think that's something that I wish I had a little more time to sit with, just because it can, the imposter syndrome creeps up right away, and you want, people to know what they can count on you for. And unfortunately, that's not like you can't just wave a magic wand for that. So, yeah.
Yeah, those are interesting points. I think, yeah, the the living off is a big paradigm shift, and I don't know if it's like, you could ever really fully prepare for that necessarily. But and then I think, yeah, that idea, I guess, of sort of like the way that you show up in a position like this is different than others. Similar in the sense of, I think, just like when you live in the halls, you are in sort of a fishbowl in a sense of, that people like ask you questions in the parking lot where it's like, I'm not technically working, but like, yes, I think to your question. So, you know, I think you can build upon the foundation that you might have, doing that, and then sort of adapting it to that idea of following through on sort of like what you say you're about and all that, like you're saying. So, I think, yeah, I mean, and I mean, that's even just, I mean, generally good advice for everybody is that, like, in my mind, it's that idea of like it all counts, it all matters, and like, uh, all the details and all that sort of stuff. But so as we wrap up, I think you've shared a lot of great kind of anecdotes and things, from your experience. If you want to kind of tie it all together, and certainly, I mean, there's always kind of an opportunity if there are like specific resources or things that you'd want to kind of highlight. But just final thoughts, advice that you'd want folks to consider before they make a similar move as we wrap up this episode.
Okay. I think I do have a few. I think the first would be self-esteem is definitely essential. Like when you're in a mid-level role, you got to handle a lot of feedback and people who disagree and criticism. And you have to know your worth outside of that. And that, like, that's just going to be part of the process. It's not going to be perfect. And I think with that too, I would, if anyone's thinking about moving up, I would definitely suggest really think about your relationship with your current peers. I think it's, when you're a hall director, you're usually less involved with each other's work and things like that. You work together in different ways, but if someone you work with doesn't have the same style as you, usually doesn't mega impact how you show up. But I think I've learned like I have to figure out how I can challenge my peers and trust them. And like, I hope that they can do the same for me, is like challenging and trusting constantly. It's a lot more of a collaborative environment that I didn't expect. And so I think that's like something I would emphasize and work on for sure. And then maybe, another piece is like, ask yourself, is this something you really want? I think there are messages that tell us that we should move up, right? That might be like comparing yourself to others, of like, this is what housing professionals do. Like, this is what you do when you want to continue on. Or especially for people with majority identities, like we live in this culture of dominance and like capitalism and power that teach us that we're supposed to want more, and we should want more power and things like that. When in reality, like that might be driving your decision more than like this might actually be a good fit. So I think like the questions I would ask is like, what parts of a mid-level role would work for you? Like there's less student interaction for sure. There's, full-time professionals are different than student staff. Usually they have more experience and more supervisors in the past that have driven their work. And I think too, like that involves working with people with very different styles. You can't like coach the same way. Obviously you can help like course correct and things like that, but sometimes you're going to have style. The way you do emails or do meetings might be different from someone you supervise. And that doesn't mean that they're wrong in that. So how do you figure out how to work with that and still like develop them in a way that like you're not familiar with? And I think, thinking about like all of the, like if you work in an institution with a leadership team, thinking about all the things that like you don't like about them or you don't like about the things that you see. And now knowing that you are going to be in a position where you might have to represent that and represent ideas that you might disagree with and things like that. Because I think it's not that it's ever going to be easy. It's not like the easiest thing in the world, but it's also going to be like an integral part of moving up. And you get less, the wins are more like, the professional staff member I supervise just did a great presentation to the department. That's amazing. I'm happy for them. It's not like, 200 people showed up for karaoke. I'm so happy, which is fun too. But like, there's just less of that. And so it just looks different. And I think to figure out what fulfillment means and how a mid-level role might fit into your life and your career for yourself, and making sure it's about you and not just like the people around you who've been like telling you things about what it means to be mid-level. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good takeaway to sort of like, one piece of what you're mentioning, like resist the pressure or the presumption that like the only way forward is up and managing people and doing whatever. And especially like going that route before you feel earnestly ready and prepared. Because I think what I've been thankful for is just recognizing that there uh, can be a lot of ways to be a very positive, impactful individual contributor. Like you can just be sort of like, yeah, like I am, this role, like I don't directly supervise anybody, whatever, but like I'm doing critical work for sort of maybe the operations of things or whatever else. And I think, yeah, that idea of just like, I mean, so much of I think of our conversation centering on sort of like the self-awareness work that you're doing, or sort of like, exploring within yourself. Where are you? What are you looking for? How can you get it? And how can you best prepare yourself to kind of, make transitions like this and, be successful in them. So I think it's a lot of great stuff for folks to think about. They should definitely obviously go read all of your blogs that you've done. And we certainly appreciate you for all that you have written and for taking time out to hang out for this podcast episode. And we'll have ways to have folks connect with you as well. Keep the conversation going. But just thanks so much for hanging out.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.